And these crews are needed down there, and to put this into perspective, they're actually joining about 12,000 firefighters who are currently battling these fires in California. Just a huge response. In fact, it was yesterday that the city of Kirkland posted on their Facebook page asking people to keep these first responders in their thoughts as they head down south. Here's actually a photo that was posted by the city of Kirkland. It shows the firefighters arriving at the Calistoga Fairgrounds. They will be providing support for what is being called the LNU Lightning Complex fire. It's about 350,000 acres and only 21% contained. We're hearing firefighters from roughly 15 local departments are helping battle these massive fires in California. Kitsap and Snohomish County crews have also headed south. North Kitsap Fire and Rescue says its strike team is focused on protecting property within the Wallbridge fire zone. That is just one of the 3 fires that are making up the LNU complex fire. The department says right now that the Wallbridge fire, that portion, is 0% contained. Now, to talk about how needed these crews are, in addition to going to California, some crews have also been sent to Central Oregon to battle a fire that's happening there. That is called the Frog Fire. And now on Facebook, on social media, people are sending their well wishes. They're keeping their safety in mind, and they're really talking about how much they appreciate the work of the firefighters like here in Kirkland are doing. Some mentioning, hey, they grew up in these towns that are now catching fire, and they are just really thankful that these crews are going down there to help. Live in Kirkland, Callie Greenberg, King 5 News.